just so hard right now. So what's your? I mean, like it's hard to be into the conspiracy stuff and be like, what do you think about his cabinet and all that stuff? But
yeah.
it's hard. It's hard. But like again, do we want to be the black pill people?
I think the conversation that David Knight had with Alex Jones, he talks about all the time, that they had in the break room before the 2016 election, you know, and before David was fired. He was fired in 2020 and from InfoWars. And I'm friends with David Knight. I'm friends with a lot of the InfoWars. I used to be a host there, a guest host on InfoWars. I'm always thankful for that network and Alex for putting me on. But they had a conversation that David talks about. He says, well, you know, Alex asked David, he said, what happens if Trump wins? And David said, well, we applaud him when he does well, and we oppose him when he does wrong. And I think that's the best way to do it. It's balanced. If he's going to do something that I applaud, like making Bitcoin a strategic reserve asset, great, I applaud that. Telling countries there's going to be 100% tariff for not using the dollar, I oppose that because it hurts us, and I think that in the long run, we ought to make it more attractive for companies to come here. We ought to make it, a tax-free zone. We ought to be abolishing certain regulations. We ought to just open up our markets. We have a lot of American entrepreneurs that want to go to work, and the American worker is magnificent. We ought to put people back to work. That should be our focus. I think, weaponization of the dollar has backfired. Again, we can see
horribly.
The de-dollarization happening just in real time, and it's something I do in my business. I'm watching it. And so I disagree with that. And his cabinet, it seems like they're preparing for war. That's what I would look at. And it's very Zionist centered. Maybe some of it is moving away from the Ukraine issue. But it's also, here's another term that I found is bizarre. Because I ran for, as a conservative in the Republican Party, I was still a black sheep. But back then, it's 10 years ago, there was no such term as China hawk. That's something that's new now. They brought this up. They conjured it out of thin air. China hawk? You guys gave them everything. The Bush administration gave China the most favored trading status on December 11th, 2001. That's, by the way, that's the 90 days after 9/11, and that's the anniversary of when Hitler declared war on us in 1941. They gave China everything. The Trilateral Commission, born in '73, was all about moving assets and moving, our manufacturing ability and the wealth and technology away from the West and into the East, because that's been their plan. Because the Chinese would do a much better job at creating a totalitarian technocracy, in my opinion. I think that's what what that points to. But
yeah.
But that China hawk, watch that. That's another thing. That's what his cabinet's full of, China hawks. Well, China really, again, they're an adversary in the same way that pretty much any other nation that has their own self-interest is an adversary, and they're not somebody you want to screw with. But we don't have to go to war with them. I mean, Napoleon said that China was a sleeping dragon, better let it slumber. There's wisdom in that. We just wouldn't do that. And the Taiwan thing, do we forget that we already gave Taiwan pretty much away in 1979? Zbigniew Brzezinski signed the memo to Jimmy Carter saying we don't recognize Taipei. We don't have diplomatic relations with them. Now we're giving them billions of dollars. So there's a whole policy reversal. And if you're just a teleprompter reader, you don't know this. So I'm concerned with that. I'm concerned with that term China hawk, because that's new. Because Republicans have always been about, well, you got to do business with China. We got to do this and that. And then they're just, I'm a China hawk. I don't know what that means, but I definitely think
seems like theater.
It's very much theater, and I think it gives a boogeyman. Like, they did this to our currency. They did this to our economy. They did. It's the other, and it's not us.
I totally
The calls
agree.
are coming from inside the house. We don't have
100%.
We don't have external enemies that can bring us down. What did Lincoln say? If with all the armies in the world, with a Napoleon at the head, couldn't take a drink out of the Potomac without our say-so. Yeah. It's like we either survive all time or we die by suicide. I think that's really where we are, and we're just blaming others. So it's a mixed bag on the cabinet picks. Some of them I just think, I shrug my shoulders and go, here we go again, the Soros guy. The Soros lackey that becomes the secretary.
And this time he has no excuses. Before he could be like, oh, he's new and he trusted people he shouldn't trust. Now he's been in the game for a while, and the media does not have the power to take him down like they used to. Like,
weird, isn't it? Did anybody find it just totally bizarre that nothing happened? Like November 5th rolls into November 6th, and anticlimactic. People, I was scrolling through, and seeing what people's reactions would be, and there's nothing. It was almost because there's no funding to have outrage, in my opinion. This is where me and Billy Ray would disagree. There wasn't any funding. The Soroses of the world, or the NGOs.
Billy thinks that it's natural.
He said there wouldn't be anything. And that it wouldn't be anything because the left was just, I guess at some point, it just kind of shrugged their shoulders and it was accepting it of some way. And I said, well, I felt like there was going to be, because that's what history has shown me, whether it's pallets of bricks being delivered and here you go, like a builder riot, or they fly people all over the country. It was a coordinated effort in 2020 to burn the country to the ground.
Of course.
I mean, look at what happened in Portland. And the DHS officers had to take their name tags off like we did in Afghanistan. So that you're pulling... because they were so afraid of getting doxxed by the lefty radicals that they were pulling. And by the way, the same time they were doing that and taking their name tags off because they were afraid of the lefties in Portland, the head of DHS said the number one threat to the United States was right-wing radicals.
Yeah.
So I mean, we're just cognitive dissonance, and that's what's happened.
But do you feel that that plan failed? Like January 6th, and now those guys are in jail still. We should get them all out.
Yes.
I hope he pardons them.
That will be another quick sign that if he's doing the things we hope,
totally
that
agree.
will be. Yeah.
If he Ross Ulbricht, if he
Ulbricht,
gets
yeah.
Ulbricht, get him out.
Yes.
Get those guys out. Get
Julian Assange's name should be completely like this deal they did and screwed him over with. That should be completely.
It would buy
stricken.
even if he wasn't. It would buy even if he wasn't what we think he is. Those moves would buy him so much credibility.
So much.
He could get away with some stuff we don't like because we'll be like, well, at least he did that.
Even
right?
Snowden, dude. Even Snowden, who I have questions about. Even
I
if
have a lot of questions.
But
about
if he that would buy some goodwill also, I think.
Has to. Day one, he didn't give the $250 million that he raised in the Stop the Steal in the last part of 2020, $250 million. The first $8,000 that you gave to fight legally didn't go to attorneys. It went to the RNC and it went to Trump. And where's that money? It's $250.
Oh, I didn't know that because that's exactly what BLM and Act Blue. I did not know that, dude. Really, Stop the Steal got all this money and nobody knows where it went.
Well, I mean, it went to the Trump campaign, but it didn't go to the J6ers. It didn't go to their families. It didn't go to the people that are political prisoners in this country. I've not seen any evidence that, I mean, we should not have. That's an absolute travesty of justice. And yes, some of them, went to the Capitol and wasn't a great idea. I remember I was on the air that day and I said, this is
I'm
agent
so thankful my
provocateurs.
kids.
I'm in Branson, Missouri. I have nothing to do with this. And I didn't want anything to do with it at the end of 2020 either. Anyway, because we had a lockdown election. And that's just where my politics lie. It sucks because there's been as an entrepreneur, I had to really leave the table of a lot of audience and a lot of, because I don't believe the popular, belief system when it comes to the left-right paradigm. So I had to walk away from there. There's been a lot of people that made careers on it. I'm a long-term guy. I'm a long-term view. I want my analysis to matter.
I have a friend of mine. I'm not going to get into his name because he's not here to give his side, but he said you can't blow up going down the middle. And I go, you're totally right. I mean, I'm blessed to be, this show is where it is. We're all blessed on that. But I think it would be 10 times bigger if I went hard right. Like hard right.
For a while.
Yeah.
That's the thing, but it wouldn't be you.
Yeah.
And
that's
it
why
wouldn't
I
be
don't
me.
do it.
It wouldn't be hard left, hard right. It wouldn't be you. And it reminds me of something I was reading the other day. It just really stuck in my head. They were doing experiments in a deprivation tank. And they're having people concentrate on something. And they concentrate on being angry and it would resonate a certain frequency. And then they concentrate on being love and it would resonate even higher. But the highest frequency was authenticity, where they were just comfortable with their own thing. I think that's why this show's successful and you guys are successful. It's because it's so authentic. People can tell when they're listening to your voice or listening to the subject matter that you're engaged in it, you believe it, you're curious, and that's the future. Authenticity is the future, and whether or not we're caught in this weird place in history where, you can't blow up right now, but it's a slow climb.
Do you think anybody who's on the left or deep right, you think that's authentic, or do you think they're kind of are at that point like, oh, I got to lean on this because my fans are going left? Well, the only other one is Rogan. The only other one in the middle that I would say is like kind of straight middle is kind of like Rogan.
Well, these progressives are all losing their subscribers because they kept pushing something that wasn't true. Okay. Even if, and like at the end of the day, we've learned with a lot of them that push this ideology, and you can see it on the right too. If you push this like super Christian view and you're not living that lifestyle,
Blows up
right?
in your face.
It blows up in your face. I mean, Tim Kennedy, who is that his name? Like, I love the guy. He's getting some stuff about his book right now. But I'm watching that. I'm watching this guy, Wes Whalens or something like that. He's like some alpha content guy who went to jail. And it's turning out that a lot of stuff that he allegedly had said wasn't real. It catches up with you. Like, dude, your best bet is to be as truthful as you can. You know, there's certain things like I don't like getting into the personal stuff of very personal parts of my life or like into my children. Like I don't want that out there because it's just the internet's full of assholes. We've already seen that, and there was only a couple months old. I already saw people being assholes. But I try to be as honest as I can because I feel like it's going to come out at some point, and you might as well own it. Like I get so much shit on the internet, and I just run with it because I don't really care what they call me or because it makes me laugh. But when you lie, you know, it's eventually all going to come out in the wash for sure. One thing I want to talk to you, I don't want to keep you much longer, but the this stuff, you know, everybody hates Q. I get Q. I get why they hate it. I think it's Operation Trust. I think they told us the truth because they wanted to corral us so we trust the plan and stuff like that, but they had to tell us the truth. That's the part of Operation Trust that nobody ever talks about. Yeah, it's a government, it's an intelligence operation, but they are telling you the truth because they know we're paranoid fucks, right? But the last line in there, the big thing I saw it change was, we'll save Israel for last. And it just seems like, and I said this about the Marxists and the Democrats, like all this Marxist stuff came out, and like, yeah, you're always going to have a Bernie Sanders that stays in there or Elizabeth Warren that are just entrenched in their county or wherever their constituents. But it seems like people have rejected a lot of the Marxist movement, the trans in the women's bathroom, trans in sports, all this sexual education to children. There seems to be a giant populist movement to say, let's get back to the norm. Mm-hmm. I think that you're going to see that with Zionism.
Yes.
That people are now going to wake up that Israel treats America, and if you go, Sam, who runs Israel? I think it's Bank of England. Israel treats America like America treats Latin America. Assassinate their leaders, okay? Corrupt their government, buy their politicians off. What are your whole thoughts on all that?
I think about Harry Truman and his friend Eddie Jacobson, who lobbied him to recognize the state of Israel. And there's a famous line where Truman's considering it. He's trying to give him, you know, he's going to, the election of 48 is coming up. He wants to be supportive of this new state. He says they won't take yes for an answer, you know, because he keeps trying to support him, but they wanted more. It really, you know, the modern state of Israel and foreign policy, it is the thing you're not supposed to talk about. There was that book written in the 80s, None Dare Speak Out, by a congressman. I think it's on my bookshelf, and I talked to Don Jeffries about this. But if you're running for Congress, you got to go talk to AIPAC. If you're especially if you're on the Republican side. Yeah, and I've gone and talked and sat in the room with AIPAC. I don't know what they knew what to make about me as an America Firster. This is pre-Trump era. You know, I'm running as a Pat Buchanan, Ron Paul Republican. They didn't know what to make of me. I said, well, why don't you oppose foreign aid to countries that burn our flag? Because that's something that Rand Paul found out really quickly. He tried to get an amendment that says, well, hey, let's take care of this right now. If you burn the American flag or you have anti-American protests, you don't get any American foreign aid. And the entity that smacked that down was the Israeli lobby. It was AIPAC. And he said, why would you do that? I mean, you don't burn our flag. It's not about that. It's about the principle in general of foreign aid. So that was one of the things that came out, or our foreign policy. But I think you're right. I've noticed certain news outlets that would be like 5 years ago would have had pro-Israeli stories are now turning against it. It's like it's a 180. And this is a subtlety that I notice. And again, I've been on conservative talk radio. I'm leaving by letting all my contracts lapse because it's just a dead space at this point. It's the same kind of cacophony of regurgitation of dead ideas and things that don't matter anymore. But that one proponent of that and component is is Zionism. It's just pervasive in there. And I say on my show all the time, I'll get the anti-Semitic people, and I'm not good enough for them. And I'll get the Zionists, I'm not good enough for them. And I'm just like, you guys are the worst together.
Yeah.
You're just the worst. I mean, I'll just say stuff to the anti-Semite guys. I say, you're worse than the Zionists. I can't. You won't take yes for an answer. I tell you, I oppose this foreign nation having so much influence on my beloved republic and my country. Nobody asked me what my politics of Paraguay are, or Peru, or Bolivia. Nobody cares, but they want to know, do I support the modern state of Israel? Well, I support nations' right to exist if you follow if you're a humanitarian, if you're doing it the right way. And of course, people have a right of self-determination, all this stuff. I support, I'm anti-war. I support peace. There's so many things that need to be unpacked with our history of the Balfour Declaration. You talk about
how deep does it go?
How deep
bro?
is that? What the Lord Rothschild and releasing that through Lord Balfour, and was there a quid pro quo?
And I think Balfour was a Scottish Freemason, and there's that in there. And then you look at Freemasonry in the Bible with King James and how he was a level 33 Scottish Freemason. And you're like, how deep does it go? And that's all I ask is like, you're telling me these guys are the puppet master. I go, are there strings on the puppet master? And there usually is.
My favorite interview, I was live on air, and I used to follow Mark Levin every day on AM radio. And I had James Perloff on, one of my favorite people in the world. I hope you have him on. He wrote The Shadows of Power and Truth is a Lonely Warrior. He's an old school John Birch Society guy, and he's anti-Zionist and pro-peace, and I think he's half Jewish, but he talks about the Christian Zionism and everything. And we're ending the show live on air, and he's like, we had like 60 seconds left, and of course I'm talking to this very pro-Israel audience, and he says, oh, by the way, I just want to say that Israel's not God's plan, it's a Rothschild's Israel. It just levels the whole show, like 60-second outs going to the credits, and I just like, James, you are the man. I love this. I love this man.
I love that. And it just gets into it, like how deep does it the lie go? And you have people who are like, and they do great research, man. They do great research into the Jew world order.
But I think it's also a trap that
100%.
If you don't, because you got to think, who betrayed the Israeli people? It's Benjamin Netanyahu. He made him a living experiment with Pfizer. I mean, David Knight points this out, the great research that he's done on this. I mean, the amount of experimentation that's been done on the Israeli people by their leaders, and then putting them on a war footing for what? Why is there Operation Chaos all over the Middle East? Terrorism doesn't really threaten, they can't bring down the nation state of Israel. They have 300 atomic weapons, a first-rate intelligence, first-rate Air Force, first-rate Army. They never have to use it because we blow up stuff for them. I mean, I was in Iraq. I never saw an Israeli troop. That knocking off Saddam.
I also wondered, to be honest with you, how they're really great with missiles, but it seems like when they go into territories, it doesn't go as well for them, and that's why they really love missiles. And when you get into their intelligence, like it seems like they get caught a lot, but they get, come on, get out of here.
Well, look at the blowback of the early 1980s, and I may get this wrong, John. I think it's 1983. It was Iraq was building a nuclear reactor. I think the French were helping. They were going to build nuclear power, and the Israelis just blew it up. It's called Osiris. They literally just took a unilateral action and blew up, flew over with American-made F-16s, I believe.
81. It was,
81.
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah,
so it's 81.
40 years ago. Well, that's the date of this article. Israel attacked and partially destroyed Iraq's Osiris nuclear reactor in Tawaitha using U.S.-supplied F-16s and F-15s to carry out the attack. 10 Iraqi soldiers and 1 French engineer were killed during the airstrike. Yeah, there's an image, too.
I mean, they have their own
flagged
interests, and they drag us into things. That's like USS Liberty. Was that a false flag to drag us in to fight Egypt because they're unmarked
Lyndon B.
planes?
Johnson let him get away with, set the precedence on that.
This image of, I think, is of the facility. They if this is partial destruction, by the way, I would like to see what total destruction.
By the way, that looks like a direct energy weapon in terms of weather modification, because look at the trees are all fine. Again, the trees are all fine, and this thing is just it's an explosion. Why are the trees fine?
The trees have water.
Trees
Sam.
are filled with water, and they're flexible though. Like concrete doesn't give. Concrete doesn't absorb energy; it just shatters.
Yeah, okay, Johnny, but let's get into the.
But we've seen nuclear blasts where the trees sway like this and bend.
Yeah,
and then
but
they
Johnny,
come back.
you're assuming that's a real nuclear blast.
Well, okay. Well, we've seen explosives near trees in tests. Either it's
Where?
a nuclear test in the footage. That's an explosive.
That nuke footage.
Undeniably.
The
But
one
the
that-
black and white one where
Yeah.
they're using models? That's not a real nuclear test, Johnny.
I mean, dude, people were there. Come on,
no,
give me a
dude,
break,
it's
bro.
not- it's not
you
real.
can say they weren't testing nukes, but they were testing some kind of explosive.
Johnny, when you go into paradise, you go, why was there a fire? Oh, there's a giant drought.
That's
I go,
a different thing.
Well,
The energy
then why
weapon
did
is
the trees not burn down? Because they have water in them. I'm like, well, either there's a drought or they got water in them. Which one is it?
But we know these were
I'm just
F-15s
telling
and
you, Johnny, that looks a lot like what we're talking about, where trees not just survive, have full green leaves still on them.
Okay. I mean,
There's a giant explosion.
40 years
There's
ago.
a giant explosion. Oh, I'm sorry. Is this it today?
No, this is 40 years ago. Is what I'm saying.
How long ago?
This image, right, was 81.
Yeah, it's 81.
What does that have to do with why
Well,
the
I'm saying
trees?
you're saying they had lasers coming out of the sky in 81
Yeah, I think they've had that for. They've been doing weather manipulation forever.
since the Civil War. Yeah, sure, why not? What are we talking
Johnny,
about?
we've literally had guests on talking about weather manipulation since the like 1700s.
Yeah, Lincoln was sending all these thunderstorms
You never
down there.
know,
Already
bro.
leaked.
You never know, dude. You just never know. How about the crazy thing that the head of the IDF was in Dallas on the day JFK got
That's crazy,
assassination? That just came out. Dude, it just more and more.
He didn't want nuclear proliferation, period. And then the Israelis wanted it. That's U.S. made enriched uranium that made the bombs.
If the average person had any clue how the Nazis and the fucking Zionists scissored each other for history, they just scissored. Sorry, your sister's here, but you know that. Like, I feel very bad doing that, but But the truth is, like they're hand in hand, dude. I mean, hand in hand.